They say mornings in the suburbs are supposed to be quiet. A hot cup of coffee, birds chirping, sprinklers whispering over green lawns. But mine didn't start that way. Mine began with a sound that still haunts me, the sharp click of heels cutting across the pavement like a warning bell. My wife was standing on the porch, smiling as she arranged a small folding table draped with a soft blue cloth. She spent her night shift in the ER, came home exhausted, yet still found the strength to set up a donation stand for the hospital relief fund. Cookies, brochures, a little jar that said help us save lives. That was always giving, always believing the world could be better if you tried hard enough. And then came Beverly, our neighborhood's self-proclaimed queen, the Karen of all Karens. Clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon, sunglasses perched on her nose, strutting down the street as if she owned every inch of it. The kind of woman who didn't see neighbors, only subjects. "Unauthorized activity," she barked before she'd even set foot on my lawn. Her voice was sharp, rehearsed, the tone of someone who believed fear equaled respect. She didn't even glance at the sign about hospital relief, didn't even care. She whipped out her pen and started scribbling like she was issuing a warrant. Gentle, patient, soft-spoken, offered her a cookie. "It's for the hospital, Beverly. You're welcome to donate if you'd like." If kindness could melt steel, Beverly was titanium. She snapped open a yellow tape measure from her tote bag, flicking it out like a gunslinger. Neighbors began to drift closer, whispering, pulling out their phones. I caught Tom Wynn, the retired Marine across the street, folding his arms and recording with a look that said, "I've been waiting for this." I stepped onto the porch, my voice steady. "Beverly, this is ridiculous. It's a charity table, not a flea market." Her nostrils flared. "Rules are rules, Mr. Mercer. If we allow this, what's next? Chaos, disorder." I almost laughed at the hypocrisy. "Chaos," I shot back, "is kicking an old lady's ramp off her porch. This is goodwill." Her eyes narrowed, and that's when she stepped closer, too close, onto our porch, perfume sharp and artificial in the air. She jabbed her clipboard towards chest like it was a spear. "You people think you're above the HOA, but this is my community. Everyone obeys." That word "my" still rings in my head. Not ours, not the board's, hers. Bless her heart tried to de-escalate. "Beverly, please, it's just one day. It helps the hospital, it helps all of us." But Beverly didn't want peace. She wanted control. And when stood her ground, when she said that single word, something snapped in Beverly's eyes, a flash of cruelty. Before I could move, she lifted her foot and drove it forward. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't a stumble, it was a deliberate kick. Time slowed. I saw her arms flail, the tray of cookies crashing, neighbors gasping in unison. And then impact, the sickening sound of her body hitting the stone walkway. I was at her side in 2 strides, instincts kicking in. Stabilize the neck. Check her breathing. Call 911. Her eyes were wide, her breath shallow, her skin pale as she tried to stay conscious. Around us, chaos erupted. Neighbors shouting. Phones recording. Beverly stood frozen, clipboard clutched like a shield, her mouth opening but no words coming out. I barked at Mitch, the spineless HOA president jogging over. "Call 911 now," he fumbled, muttering something useless, his face drained of color. I rattled off details to dispatch with the calm voice drilled into me from years of triage drills. But inside, rage was boiling like wildfire. I looked at my wife, broken, gasping, and then at Beverly, still clutching that cursed clipboard. And that's when my hand found the in my pocket, a device I carried only for true emergencies. My thumb pressed the recessed button labeled Amber 1. To the neighbors, it looked like nothing, just another call, but I knew exactly what it meant. That ping shot straight to the state's Emergency Operations Center. It meant the ongoing National Guard drill could escalate into live response. It meant the so-called HOA barrier Beverly had been so proud of, blocking the emergency corridor, was about to meet steel, diesel, and command authority. 3 minutes, that's all it would take. And in those 3 minutes, Beverly would learn the hardest lesson of her life. The human brain does strange things when adrenaline takes over. At first, I thought the rumble I heard was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. But then it grew louder, steadier. A rhythm no body could match, the roar of engines, heavy engines. 3 minutes, that's all it took. Neighbors froze mid-breath. Heads turned toward the east entrance, where Beverly's ornamental iron gate gleamed like some twisted badge of pride. And then, headlights cut through the morning sun. An olive-drab Humvee rolled into view, tires chewing up the asphalt like it had been waiting for this moment all along. Behind it came another, then rows of transport trucks, engines snarling, exhaust curling into the air. 5 full military convoys, Judgment Day on wheels, rolling right into our HOA cul-de-sac. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors clutched their phones, filming as if their lives depended on it. Others just stood in stunned silence, jaws slack, as the ground trembled beneath their feet. Beverly's face went pale. For the first time since I'd moved into that neighborhood, she looked small. Her hand gripped her clipboard so hard her knuckles turned white. What is this?" she stammered. Nobody answered her. Nobody had to. The first convoy screeched to a halt right at the gate she'd fought so hard to install. Soldiers spilled out in full gear, boots pounding pavement in unison. No hesitation, no wasted motion. A squad fanned out, scanning the crowd, while another unrolled hydraulic cutters that gleamed under the sun. Sparks were ready to fly. And leading them, her. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Wolfe. Sharp eyes, dark hair pulled back tight, the aura of command radiating from every step. I hadn't seen her since a statewide disaster drill years ago, but I knew instantly she was still allergic to nonsense. Her gaze swept the scene in seconds. A woman injured on the ground, an illegal gate blocking her convoy, and a suburban tyrant standing in the middle of it all with a clipboard. "What happened here?" she demanded, her voice like steel cutting glass. Deputy Reed from the county sheriff's office jogged up, having arrived just behind the convoy. He answered before Beverly could open her mouth. "Assault, Colonel. Civilian pushed down the stairs. Victim stable but injured. EMS en route." He gestured toward the barrier. "And this monstrosity, blocking emergency access." Colonel Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Recognition flashed when she saw the clip at my belt. "Mercer," she said curtly. "I should known you activated Amber 1. "Yes, ma'am," I said, my voice steady even as my pulse thundered. "Barriers non-compliant, complaints ignored, my wife's down. I wasn't going to gamble on response times." She gave a small nod, not approval, not exactly, but she understood. Then her voice rose like a whip crack. "Engineer unit cut that gate, MPs secure the scene, medics assist EMS on arrival." The soldiers moved like clockwork. Sparks erupted as hydraulic jaws bit into the gate's lock, screeching metal surrendering under the pressure. Medics knelt beside, slipping on gloves, checking her vitals with calm precision. Order bloomed from chaos in seconds. But Beverly couldn't stay silent. She thrust her clipboard out like it was a badge. "Excuse me, this is private property. You can't just barge in here. I'm vice president of this HOA, and these vehicles are not authorized." Colonel Wolfe didn't blink. "Ma'am, this is a designated emergency corridor under state statute. You've obstructed it with an unauthorized structure. Stand aside." "I will not," Beverly shrieked, her voice trembling but loud. "This is my street. You people answer to me." The laugh that rippled through the neighbors was almost enough to cut the tension. Even Tom muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Lady, you just tried to tell the U.S. Army to check in with your clipboard." Wolfe raised a single brow. "MPs." 2 soldiers stepped forward, towering over Beverly like statues. "Ma'am, move aside, or you will be physically removed." For the first time, Beverly faltered. Her eyes darted between the soldiers, the sparking torch, and the dozens of phones recording her every twitch. But pride is a stubborn disease. She planted her heels. "This is harassment. I'll sue." The MPs didn't move. Neither did Wolfe. And then sparks flew, metal shrieked, and the gate gave way with a groan that echoed like a death knell. The convoys roared back to life, engines rumbling as trucks lumbered forward, reclaiming the corridor Beverly thought she owned. The sight was biblical. 5 convoys stretching down the street, olive-drab giants rolling past cookie-cutter houses with white fences and manicured hedges. Neighbors whispered in awe, some cheering quietly under their breath. For once, Beverly's clipboard meant nothing. Stirred groaning softly, pulling me back to her side. The medic reassured me. Stable vitals, possible concussion, EMS is 2 minutes out. Relief and fury tangled in my chest as I kissed her forehead. "You're safe now," I whispered. When I looked up, Beverly was still sputtering, but something had changed. The tide had turned. The crowd wasn't with her anymore. They'd seen too much. The kick, the arrogance, the attempt to block literal soldiers from doing their jobs. Her illusion of power cracked wide open. Colonel Wolfe turned back to me. "We'll file the incident report with the county attorney. Everything's on record. You'll testify." "Gladly," I said. My voice was flat, certain. Wolfe nodded once more, then addressed the neighbors. "For the record, obstruction of emergency access is a criminal offense. If anyone else was complicit in erecting this barrier, now is the time to speak up." Mitch, the HOA president in name only, looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. His voice wavered. I didn't know. Beverly said it was decorative." Wolfe snapped back, sharp as a blade. "Save it for the county." And in that moment, Beverly screamed. Not words of power, not citations or fines, just rage. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "You're all against me. This is a conspiracy. I am this community." But the soldiers weren't listening. Neither were the neighbors. The convoys rolled forward, engines thundering, and every truck that passed stripped Beverly of the illusion she'd worn like a crown. Her reign wasn't just shaken, it was broken. And in that moment, standing beside my injured wife with soldiers reclaiming the road, I realized something. It wasn't just about me. It was about every single person Beverly had ever bullied. And for once, she was facing a power bigger than hers. Some battles end with shouting, some with fists, but this one ended with paperwork. The second that convoy secured the street, you could almost feel the invisible lines being drawn across our neighborhood. On one side, soldiers in formation, command posts being established, radios crackling. On the other, Beverly clutching her clipboard like it was Excalibur, trembling but unwilling to let go. Lieutenant Colonel Wolfe wasted no time. She strode to the center of the street, her voice cutting the air like a blade. "Command post here. MPs establish perimeter. Engineers document barrier remains. Medics coordinate with EMS." In seconds, the cul-de-sac transformed. Fluorescent cones appeared, radios squawked, soldiers moved with a precision that made the entire scene look choreographed. Order blooming from chaos. I'd seen it before in deployments and disaster drills. The way professionals step in and pull clarity out of confusion. But this time, my heart wasn't steady. It was split between fury and worry. Because even as the guard established control, my wife lay strapped to a backboard, paramedics working to keep her stable. Deputy Reed's light blinked red as he stepped closer to Wolfe. His voice was steady, no nonsense. "We're treating this as assault and obstruction of emergency access." Wolfe's eyes hardened. She turned to me. "Mercer, I need your documentation, all of it." I pulled a folder from my go bag, a habit you never shake after years in operations. Inside were printed emails, maps, statutes, photos of the barrier, time-stamped letters I'd sent to the HOA board. Weeks of warnings ignored. Wolfe flipped through them, her jaw tightening with every page. "They ignored this, every word." "Yes, ma'am." Mitch rubber-stamped whatever Beverly wanted. "I warned them this exact thing could happen." She muttered something under her breath that I won't repeat, then snapped her fingers at an aide. "Scan these, forward to county legal and the state office." And while real authority was moving into place, Beverly was winding herself up for another tantrum. She stomped forward, heels clicking like gunfire. "Excuse me. You cannot establish a command post on HOA grounds without authorization from the board. This is private property. You're trespassing." The MP closest to her didn't even blink. "Ma'am, step back behind the perimeter." Her voice rose to a shriek. "I am the perimeter." Deputy Reed actually chuckled. "Lady, state law outranks your HOA bylaws. Obstruction of an emergency corridor. That's a felony waiting to happen, and that kick you delivered, plain and simple, that's assault. Her face flushed red, sweat beading at her temple. She jabbed a manicured finger at me. He set me up. He's behind all of this. I stared her down, my voice flat. You did this to yourself, Beverly, and it's all on video. That was the dagger. Half the neighbors had their phones raised, screens already replaying the moment she'd lashed out. Tom Wynn, the retired Marine, had a perfect angle. In the playback, you could hear the sound, unmistakable, the sharp thud of her kick, the gasp from the collective cry of shock. One neighbor even had slow-motion footage. Reed leaned in, his tone heavy. Looks intentional to me. Beverly's bravado faltered. Her face went chalk white. Meanwhile, Inspector from the city crouched by the cut-open gate, snapping photos and muttering violations like a grim mantra. Blocking ADA access. Fire lane obstruction. No construction permit. Wrong materials. Unlicensed contractor. He paused, glanced at me. You said you emailed the board about this. 3 times, I said. Ignored every time. Pulled a tablet, tapping into the city's permit database. His brows shot up. Interesting. The official application for this gate lists a contractor by the name of Landscaping. My stomach turned, as in Beverly's cousin. Shook his head. LLC filed last year, no license on record, looks like a shell company, classic self-dealing. The neighbors gasped audibly. Tom muttered, "Oh, she's done." And the hits kept coming. One of Wolf's aides approached with a tablet showing fresh dashcam footage from the guards' vehicles. The entire scene, Beverly yelling, the gate blocking the convoy, sparks flying as engineers cut it open, all of it caught in crystal clarity. Wolf smirked as she reviewed it. "Congratulations, Ms. You're starring in a training video on what not to do." Beverly's voice cracked as she screamed, "This is outrageous. You're conspiring against me. I'll sue every one of you." Deputy Reed didn't flinch. He held up a citation slip like a magician revealing his final trick. "Ma'am, you're already facing assault and obstruction. Keep going, I'll add disorderly conduct." For once, Mitch, the spineless president, found his voice. His polo shirt was soaked through with sweat as he stammered, "Please, Beverly, stop. They've got evidence. We can't fight this." Her head snapped toward him. "Shut up, Mitch, you're useless." But something shifted in his eyes. For the first time since I'd moved into that neighborhood, Mitch grew a spine. His voice shook, but his words cut like glass. "I'm done. I'm not going down with you. I'll cooperate. I have the HOA's financial records at home. I'll hand them over." You could feel the collective gasp. Neighbors whispering, phones recording every word. Beverly spun on him like a cornered animal. "You traitor." But Mitch wasn't backing down. I thought this was about keeping lawns neat, not laundering money. The crowd erupted, years of resentment spilling out all at once. "She fined me for chalk drawings on my driveway," one grandfather shouted. Another neighbor yelled, "She threatened to tow my car for being an inch over the line." Others chimed in, voices rising like a tide. The clipboard queen's grip on the neighborhood was cracking, not just under military boots, but under the weight of every neighbor she'd ever bullied. Reed radioed for backup. Possible financial crimes investigation. Secure HOA records as soon as possible. Scribbled furiously. City will issue emergency order to audit all expenditures. Wolf snapped her logbook shut, her voice final. "From this moment forward, this HOA is under joint jurisdiction until the corridor is certified safe. Ms., you're relieved of whatever authority you think you had." That was the breaking point. Beverly's shriek split the air. She hurled her clipboard down, papers scattering like confetti at a nightmare parade. She lunged toward me, finger stabbing the air. "This is your fault. You brought them here." I met her glare head-on. "You're right, I did, and I'd do it again." The MPs stepped between us, firm but calm. Beverly's tirade dissolved into shrieks about conspiracies and property values, but no one was listening. The Queen of Citations had no crown anymore, only a clipboard now crushed under an MP's boot. And for the first time since we moved here, the neighborhood felt free. Some people crumble quietly. Beverly didn't. She went down kicking, screaming, clawing at the very air around her as if volume could undo truth. The convoys were still rumbling through, olive-drab trucks reclaiming the road she thought she owned. The soldiers moved with calm precision, marking every violation, documenting every scrap of evidence. But Beverly looked like a caged animal. Deputy Reed flicked his on, his voice steady but sharp. "Ma'am, this device is recording. State your full name and position with the HOA for the record." Her chin jutted upward, defiant even as sweat poured down her temple. "Beverly, Vice President of the Rosewood Homeowners Association, and I demand you cease this harassment immediately." Reed's lips twitched like he was holding back a laugh. "Noted. For the record, witnesses report you physically assaulted Mrs. Mercer, resulting in injury. Do you deny this?" Her mouth opened and closed. It was an accident, she tripped. Tom Wynn's voice cut in like a blade. "I've got the whole thing on video." He held up his phone, neighbors crowding around to see. The sound was clear as day, the thud of her kick, the collective gasps, cry. Another neighbor replayed it in slow motion, the evidence undeniable. Reed leaned closer, his words like a verdict. "Looks intentional to me." For once, Beverly's voice failed her. Inspector was still crouched by the ruined gate, muttering violations like a grim litany. Unauthorized construction, ADA pathway blocked, fire code breach, no permit, wrong materials. His tablet dinged as he scrolled. "And here it is, contractor on record landscaping, registered to your cousin." Neighbors gasped again, their whispers like sparks in dry grass. Fraud, embezzlement, the words hung heavy in the air. Wolf's aide strode over, tablet in hand, showing the guard's dashcam footage. The convoy, the sparks, the barrier being cut open, all captured in unforgiving clarity. Wolf didn't even look at Beverly as she muttered, "Training video material, how not to run a community." Beverly screamed, her voice cracking. "This is a conspiracy, you're all working against me." Reed snapped out a citation slip, crisp as a guillotine. "Assault, obstruction, disorderly conduct, keep talking and I'll add resisting." And then Mitch broke. The man who'd been her puppet for years, standing behind her like a shadow, suddenly found his backbone. His voice trembled, but his words cut sharper than any citation. "I can't do this anymore. They're right. They've got evidence. Beverly, this is over." Her head whipped toward him, eyes wild. "You spineless traitor." But Mitch didn't flinch. He turned to Reed. "I'll cooperate. I have the HOA's financial records at home, every check, every receipt. I'll hand them over." The gasp that went through the crowd felt like an earthquake. Phones went higher, faces lit with vindication. Neighbors began shouting, years of resentment boiling over. "She fined me for my grandson's chalk drawings," one man cried, cane shaking in the air. A mother's voice cracked with anger. "She called my son's wheelchair ramp a violation." Others piled on, voices growing louder, angrier, a chorus of rebellion. For the first time, Beverly wasn't feared. She was despised. Wolf snapped her logbook shut, her tone final. "From this moment forward, this HOA falls under joint jurisdiction until the corridor is certified safe. Ms., you're relieved of whatever authority you think you had." It was like watching a dam break. Beverly's face twisted, her screams turning shrill, desperate. She hurled her clipboard to the pavement, papers scattering like ash. She lunged at me, finger stabbing the air. "This is your fault. You ruined me." I didn't flinch. "You ruined yourself. All I did was press the button." The MPs stepped between us, firm and unyielding. Her tirade spiraled into incoherence. Lawsuits, conspiracies, property values, as if words could rebuild her crumbling kingdom. But no one listened anymore. The Queen of Citations had no crown, only shattered papers and a clipboard crushed under a soldier's boot. Behind me, the paramedics lifted carefully into the ambulance. I bent to kiss her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open just long enough to whisper, "I'm okay, don't worry." But I did, I always would. The doors shut with a heavy thud, siren wailing as the ambulance pulled away. For a moment I wanted to chase it, to sit by her side. But my boots stayed planted on the ground, because this wasn't just about us anymore. It was about every neighbor Beverly had bullied, every kindness she had tried to crush. Inspector straightened, snapping photos of the papers Beverly had thrown. City will issue an emergency audit. If this fraud holds, we're looking at dissolution of the HOA. Mitch dropped his gaze, shame written all over his face. For once, he wasn't the spineless president. He was just a man caught in the web of Beverly's greed, trying to claw his way out. Colonel Wolf's voice snapped me back. "Mercer." I met her eyes. "You knew this would happen, didn't you? You set the trap." I didn't deny it. I planned for accountability. The assault wasn't part of it, but it proved the point better than any drill could. She studied me, her gaze weighing judgment against respect. Then she gave a single nod. "Sometimes the system needs people like you, people willing to make noise." Noise, that's one word for it. Justice with an engine roar was what I called it. As the convoys rumbled on, neighbors whispered and filmed, sending clips that would go viral before sundown. Some looked at me with gratitude, some with awe. And Beverly? She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not the clipboard queen anymore, just a petty tyrant finally caught under the floodlights she couldn't dim. And I realized the battle wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time since we moved here, the battlefield was mine. The days that followed felt like waking up in a different neighborhood. For years, Beverly had ruled with her clipboard like it was a crown. But once the convoys rolled out, once the soldiers and inspectors left behind their reports, her empire collapsed like a rotten fence in a storm. The very afternoon of the incident, Deputy Reed filed the official assault report. The county attorney didn't waste time. Charges of misdemeanor assault and obstruction of an emergency corridor were stamped and signed. And watching Beverly being escorted into the back of a patrol car, heels clacking on the pavement, face twisted in outrage, was something I'll never forget. She screamed about civil rights violations, lawsuits, conspiracies. But her words were drowned out by the clicks of cameras, the glow of cell phones, the whispers of neighbors who finally saw her for what she really was. Mitch resigned within 48 hours. His letter, taped sheepishly to the HOA bulletin board, was short and trembling. I allowed myself to be pressured into decisions that hurt this community. I regret not standing up sooner. It was the first honest thing I'd ever seen him write. The county attorney announced that the HOA's finances were under immediate audit. Rumors spread like wildfire: embezzled landscaping funds, shell invoices, beautification projects that lined Beverly's cousins' pockets. For once, neighbors weren't afraid to talk. They gathered in small knots on the cul-de-sac, trading stories like survivors comparing scars. Every fine, every threat, every humiliation, all the things that had festered quietly now poured into daylight. But through it all, my mind was fixed on one thing. The hospital confirmed no permanent spinal damage. Her ribs were badly bruised. A mild concussion left her dizzy for days, but by some miracle she hadn't broken her back. Still, seeing her in that neck brace, pale but smiling, cut deeper than anything Beverly had ever done to me. "You can't bubble wrap me," she teased one night as I fussed over her on the porch. "I'm tougher than you think." I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I never doubted that, but forgive me if I'd like to keep you safe." She leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice soft but steady. "You did more than that. You kept this whole community safe. You drew a line, Jack." And maybe she was right, because from that day forward the line stayed drawn. Within a month, the county placed the HOA under interim receivership. The clipboard kingdom was officially dissolved. What had once been tribunal-style meetings, where Beverly barked fines and Mitch nodded along, turned into gatherings of actual neighbors planning real improvements. We repaired Sramp properly this time, painting it the cheerful blue she loved. We organized volunteer crews to repaint fences, fix broken sidewalks, trim hedges. Tom Wynn, Marine through and through, set up a neighborhood watch that was more about safety than punishment. The air itself felt lighter, freer. For the first time since moving in, I felt like we weren't tenants in Beverly's kingdom. We were a community. Beverly, of course, tried to claw her way back. From her lawyer's office, she sent threatening letters, claims of defamation, warnings of lawsuits. But those letters didn't land like they used to. People didn't cower. They laughed. One neighbor taped hers to a mailbox with a sticky note, "Return to sender. We don't scare easy anymore." The HOA election came sooner than expected. Half the neighborhood nominated me, but I declined. "I've spent enough of my life in command posts," I told them. "It's your turn to lead." Instead, I endorsed a slate of practical, reasonable neighbors, people who cared more about broken streetlights than hedge height. They won in a landslide. Tom cornered me afterward, grinning. "You sure you don't want the power, Jack?" I shook my head. "Power isn't the point. Accountability is. Besides," I glanced at, who was baking cookies for every soldier who had driven a convoy through our street. "I've got my hands full." He laughed, clapped me on the shoulder. For once, it felt like the neighborhood was laughing with us, not at us. The last time I saw Beverly was at a county hearing. Her lawyer whispered furiously in her ear while inspectors read violation after violation, auditors reading line after line of suspicious transactions. She didn't look like a queen anymore. She looked small. And maybe that was justice enough. Life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it gets in a place where 5 military convoys once roared through your cul-de-sac. But every time I sat on the porch every time I heard the faint rumble of engines on a distant highway, I smiled. Not because of the chaos they brought, but because of the order they restored. It struck me then, some battles aren't fought with fists or guns. Some battles are fought with patience, with planning, with the courage to press a button at the right moment. For us, that moment came 3 minutes after a kick, and it changed everything. And the lesson burned into me that day was simple. Bullies only thrive in silence. The second you push back, with truth, with evidence, with solidarity, the clipboard turns into scrap paper. Most people thought the drama ended the day Beverly was hauled into that patrol car. But the truth is, it was only the beginning. Because if the convoys had ripped open the gates, the audit ripped open the books. Inspector wasted no time. Within a week, county officials announced a full-scale review of every HOA transaction over the last 5 years, and what they uncovered spread through the neighborhood faster than gossip on a summer porch. Invoices for landscaping projects that never happened. Thousands paid to landscaping, Beverly's cousin's shell company. Charges for security upgrades that turned out to be nothing but her home's private alarm system. HOA dues siphoned into accounts that had nothing to do with beautification and everything to do with Beverly's obsession with control. Neighbors crowded together in driveways at night, reading aloud the reports like campfire horror stories. Every page peeled back another layer of corruption, another betrayal of trust. And the more they read, the angrier they became. One mother shook her head, clutching the paperwork. She fined me $200 for letting my kids draw chalk on the sidewalk. Meanwhile, she was stealing thousands from all of us. Tom Wynn added darkly, "She wanted control, not community. Now she's got the county breathing down her neck." It wasn't just financial. Inspectors confirmed the gate project violated 6 safety codes, fire lanes blocked, ADA pathways ignored, no construction permit filed. The kind of negligence that could have cost lives if the wrong emergency had struck. For years, Beverly had justified every fine, every demand with 4 words. "It's in the bylaws." But the county made it clear. State law outranks HOA bylaws. And those same bylaws were now being rewritten, not by her, but by professionals who actually cared about safety and fairness. Meanwhile, Beverly's lawyer tried every trick in the book. Claims of harassment, arguments about community standards, threats of defamation lawsuits against anyone who spoke publicly, but the evidence was stacked too high, and worse for her, the neighbors weren't afraid anymore. One by one, they spoke out. Cane in hand told a local reporter, "She called my ramp an eyesore. That ramp's the only reason I can still live here." Another neighbor said, "She fined me for leaving my garbage bin out for one night, and all the while she was pocketing our money." The press swarmed in, cameras on lawns. Headlines splashed across local news, HOA vice president charged with assault, fraud allegations pending. For Beverly, it wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was humiliation, public, relentless, impossible to escape. Through it all was healing. She ditched the neck brace after a few weeks, walking slower than usual but with that quiet determination I loved so much. One evening, as we sat on the porch, she watched the neighbors talking together, planning repairs and potlucks instead of fighting about hedges. "This is what it should have been from the start," she whispered. I nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air. But even storms leave damage, and Beverly wasn't done lashing out. From her lawyer's office, she sent more letters, grandiose threats written in legal jargon. She even tried to claim the Convoys had lowered property values by frightening potential buyers. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. Because the truth was, property values were climbing. For the first time in years, people wanted to move into our neighborhood, not because it was strictly managed, but because it was finally free. And Beverly, she was trapped. The very bylaws she had wielded like a sword were now being rewritten to strip her of every ounce of power. Deputy Reed told me privately, "Assault's just the beginning. If the financial crimes stick, she's looking at years, not months." Mitch, desperate to save his own skin, handed over boxes of records. His testimony painted the final picture. Beverly had bullied the board, votes, and funneled money where she pleased. The neighbors didn't just cheer her downfall, they united against the system she'd created. Block by block, people started projects Beverly would have called violations. Community gardens, porch swings, colorful flower beds. The neighborhood was blooming in every sense of the word. One Saturday I saw on her ramp, smiling as kids decorated it with chalk drawings. Hearts, flowers, a big "get well soon" across the top. Beverly had called it graffiti once. Now it looked like victory. And yet, I couldn't shake a truth that settled heavy in my chest. Power only lasts as long as people allow it. For years, Beverly thrived on silence, on neighbors too tired or too scared to fight back. She built her throne on fear. But the second we stood together, the clipboard turned to dust. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel or a cell door. Sometimes it comes with neighbors saying, "No more." As I looked at, laughing softly with kids who handed her cookies they'd baked for her recovery, I felt something I hadn't felt since we moved here. Peace. Real peace. And I knew we hadn't just survived Beverly's reign, we ended it. The county courthouse wasn't built for HOA drama. It had seen murder trials, fraud cases, bitter custody battles. But that day, when Beverly walked in wearing her pastel blazer and forced smile, clutching a new clipboard like it was armor, the room felt like it was hosting the trial of a dictator. Reporters lined the benches, cameras flashing. Neighbors filled every seat, some standing along the back wall. You could feel the weight of years of frustration pressing down on her. This wasn't just about one assault. It was about every fine, every humiliation, every ounce of fear she had wielded like a weapon. The county attorney laid it out piece by piece. First, the assault. The footage played on the screen, her kick, fall, the gasp of the crowd. The sound alone was enough to make stomachs churn. The jury winced. Beverly flinched for the first time, her lawyer whispering furiously in her ear. Then came the fraud. The inspector stood tall, tablet in hand. He scrolled through invoices, permits, financial records, landscaping, security upgrades, beautification fees, all of it funneled into pockets that weren't supposed to exist. "Ladies and," the attorney said, voice firm, "this wasn't negligence. This was theft. Theft from every homeowner who paid dues, theft disguised as community improvement, and it was enforced with threats, intimidation, and violence." The neighbors erupted in murmurs, some shaking their heads, others whispering angrily. Tom Wynn muttered loud enough for half the room to hear, "She called us lawbreakers while she lined her own pockets." Mitch next, his voice shook but his words carried weight. "She bullied me, threatened me, told me if I didn't sign off on projects I'd be removed as president. I thought it was about rules, I didn't know it was about money." The county attorney slid a letter onto the projector. Beverly's own words, emailed to the board, "Fear keeps people compliant." That single sentence hit harder than any photograph. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. And then it was my turn. I stood, straightened my shoulders, and told them everything. The ignored warnings, the barrier blocking the emergency corridor. The convoys, watching fall, watching Beverly smirk as if kindness was a crime. When I finished, the room was silent. Even Beverly's lawyer couldn't meet my eyes. The judge leaned forward, voice heavy. I've seen my share of abuse of power, but this is remarkable in its pettiness and its cruelty. For once, Beverly had no comeback. She sat frozen, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. Outside the courtroom, neighbors together like a small army. They held handmade signs, justice for no more clipboard queens, our street, our rules, not hers. Was there too, leaning on me, still walking a little carefully but smiling through the pain. When neighbors spotted her, they broke into applause. A nurse who had spent her life saving strangers was now being lifted up by the very people Beverly had tried to silence. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about punishment. It was about community reclaiming its voice. The county attorney closed his argument with a line that stayed with me. Power is not measured by clipboards or bylaws. Power belongs to the people who stand together. And today, these people have spoken. The verdict wasn't immediate. The fraud charges needed more investigation, but the assault and obstruction were clear. Guilty. Beverly's face twisted, eyes wide like someone realizing too late that the world had shifted beneath her feet. The judge's gavel struck, sentencing deferred, bail. The deputies stepped forward, cuffs snapping around her wrists. And for the first time, the clipboard queen was stripped of her crown, not by neighbors, not by soldiers, but by the system she thought she controlled. She screamed as they dragged her out, a shrill, broken cry. This is my community, you'll regret this, all of you. But no one looked afraid, no one even flinched. They just watched her go. In that silence something bloomed, a new kind of unity. Neighbors hugged each other, kids waved signs. Even Mitch, guilt heavy on his shoulders, stood taller, finally free of her grip. Leaned closer to me, her voice soft but fierce. She thought fear made her strong, but look at them, Jack, look at us, fear's gone. She was right. Fear was gone. And in its place, something stronger was taking root. Most battles end in noise. Ours ended in silence. The silence of a clipboard no longer snapping fines. The silence of a gate torn down and hauled away as scrap. The silence of neighbors who no longer whispered in fear but spoke openly in trust. The weeks after Beverly's conviction felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. The county dissolved the old board, placing our HOA into receivership. Auditors kept digging, pulling thread after thread of Beverly's fraud until the whole web unraveled. Every cent she had stolen was accounted for, every shady deal traced back to her family's shell company. The fraud charges stacked higher and higher, and with them, the illusion of power she once wielded crumbled into dust. But for me, the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was at home. Healing was slow but steady. Each day she walked a little farther, laughed a little louder, until the bruises faded and her smile came back full. One morning, she stood on the porch where she had fallen, sunlight in her hair, and placed a new sign on a small table. Hospital Relief Fund, thank you for believing. This time there was no clipboard, no shouting, no tape measure snapping in the air. Instead, neighbors lined up with cookies, flowers, and envelopes of donations. Tom Wynn even brought a flag he'd kept folded since his Marine days and planted it right next to her table. For you, he said, voice thick with pride. For standing taller than the rest of us. Smiled, tears in her eyes. For once her kindness wasn't met with cruelty, it was met with gratitude. The neighborhood transformed in ways I never thought possible. Kids rode bikes without being chased down for noise violations. This ramp was painted bright blue again, decorated with flowers and chalk hearts. Families held barbecues in front yards, music drifting through the streets without fear of citations. The very things Beverly had called chaos became the heartbeat of community. And me, I didn't take a leadership role. When neighbors asked me to run for president of the new board, I told them no. I'd spent enough of my life giving orders in command posts. It was time for others to lead. But I stayed watchful, quietly watchful, because once you've seen how power can corrupt, you never stop listening for the sound of heels clicking like a warning bell. The last I saw of Beverly was in the county detention center, her face pale behind the glass as reporters shouted questions she no longer had answers for. She looked small, not the queen of citations anymore, just a woman who mistook fear for respect and lost everything when the fear finally broke. I didn't feel triumph watching her. I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt closure. Because Beverly wasn't the first tyrant I'd faced, and she wouldn't be the last. Bullies come in many forms, sometimes in suits, sometimes in uniforms, sometimes with a badge, and sometimes with a clipboard. But their power is always the same, borrowed, fragile, paper-thin. It lasts only as long as good people stay silent. That's what reminded me, sitting on the porch one night as fireflies danced in the yard. She leaned against me, her voice soft but sure. "You didn't just save me, Jack. You saved all of us. You showed them we didn't have to live scared." Her words sank deep, because she was right. I hadn't pressed that button just for her, or for me. I'd pressed it for every neighbor fined for chalk drawings, every family threatened for a flower bed, every kind act twisted into a violation. And I realized then, pressing Amber 1 wasn't about summoning soldiers. It was about summoning courage. 3 minutes after a kick, everything changed. The convoys didn't just break down a gate. They broke down a lie, that one woman's clipboard could outweigh truth, justice, and community. And every time I hear the low rumble of engines on a distant highway, I smile. Not because of the chaos they brought, but because of the order they restored. Because sometimes the strongest weapon isn't force. It's patience. It's planning. It's knowing when to press the button that says enough. So if there's a lesson in our story, it's this: don't ignore the small injustices. Don't let silence build a throne for a tyrant. Speak up. Document everything. Find allies. And when the moment comes, press your own version of Amber 1. Because justice doesn't arrive on its own. Sometimes you have to call it in. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next mystery on HOA Hunter Stories.